Okay, September 29, 2025. Today's a bit of a mixed bag. Typically Mondays are my logos day, so it kind of gets towards that in the end. That said, this weekend I finished a couple of books. The first one being The Impossible by George Bataille. I just finished up part 3, Aristophanes, which is named after a Greek play. I believe it's a trilogy that has to do with sort of blood for blood, even bringing in matricide, which is the killing of one's own mother. I suppose Agamemnon was a king, and he sacrificed his daughter, and so when he came back from war, his wife killed him, and then when their son came back under the sort of influence or judgment of Apollo, Apollo told the son, Orestes, to kill his mom. So he killed his mom with his sister, and then Furies chased after him, and there was like a trial. But it's a pretty, I suppose, matricide is one of the bigger deal crimes, or sort of no-nos in Greek tragedy. So, or in Greek, the Greeks' life. Okay, anyways, so I got a few quotes. It's mostly poetry, but it was all really, really good. The first one being on, I'm afraid, being certain I will no longer avoid the fight. I guess this line stuck out to me just because I don't know if you've ever been in a fight, and I have only like a couple of times, not really something I'm like extremely like proud of. But moments before you commit to that kind of thing, if you're someone like me who's not like used to that, to violence, or not really into that, it can be very disorienting, and the rush of adrenaline is just so insane. You're just like, I'm in it. I can't, I don't know what's gonna happen, but I can't, I'm facing it, and it's just hard to put words to, but it is a sort of fear. I mean, I was scared, surely. Nervous for myself. I was more afraid I would look stupid. I'd end up looking, but it only lasted like 2 seconds. In the minute something happened, we were just torn apart. Regardless. And then just like stupid stuff with friends when you're a kid. It's just, second quote. I could have said about myself what Kierkegaard said 100 years ago. My head is as empty as a theater in which there has just been a performance. I really enjoyed the imagery of the hollowness of a theater left behind, like a dead silence. It's as if a singular person stayed there after everybody left. It's just, or even nothing, just the absence. I think the power comes from the absence, from what was once present, and I just like that. Then poetry that does not rise to the nonsense of poetry is only the hollowness of poetry, is only beautiful poetry. So within this, he also goes into his own poetic philosophy, or at least the characters are. And then, with poetry, I entered a kind of grave where the infinity of the possible was born from the death of the logical world. Logic, on its deathbed, gave birth to mad riches. Yeah. There's just so much great stuff. The object of my desire was illusion, first of all. and could be the void of disillusion only in the second instance. I'm sort of skipping around here. Poetry reveals a power of the unknown. It conceals the known within the unknown. It is the unknown painted in blinding colors. Now my desire has just one object, the beyond of those thousand figures and the night. In the form that night takes, existence cannot recognize what is anticipated. So yeah, finished this guy. Really enjoyed it. Took me a few weeks though, but I guess rather just a few days because I would just kind of do one day a week. Okay, then Robert Walser's The Walk. I had started this a couple of times, and a while ago I read 30 pages and sort of left it there, but then I finished the rest. It's only 89 pages, so it's a novella, I suppose. And man, it's just a great story. Essentially, it's exactly as it is, just a walk, narrated by a writer. But it's, I think, W.G. Sebald puts it as a clairvoyant of the small, and yet he just makes everything sort of seem very, very. I guess I'll read you some things and it'll reveal itself or speak for itself. Children are heavenly because they are always in a kind of heaven. When they grow older, their heaven vanishes. They fall out of their childishness into the dry, tedious, calculating manner and the utilitarian, highly respectable perceptions of adults. He just is passing by children, and he just happens to witness an event, and that's sort of, and then he goes into it more, but he also passes by a sort of ogre-like figure, and almost it struck me sort of as like Frankenstein, but maybe not so much Frankenstein, because I feel like Frankenstein's maybe a little bit more sensitive, but but for this it said, for him nothing existed which had meaning, and he himself in turn meant something to nobody at all. Out of his eyes there broke a glare of grief from underworlds and overworlds, and indescribable pain spoke from each of his slack and wary movements. Spoken? I probably annotated that incorrectly, but I wrote that incorrectly. That's on page 37. Sorry, I'm just skipping around. Yeah, Tom Zach. Yeah. So, but then later on, I mean, and it's also like extremely funny. I mean, the way it's written, it sort of makes you want to talk. At least in my head, it sounds like a very exuberant figure. Okay. To have a grave in the forest would be lovely. Oh man, I love this passage. Okay. High up, a gentle rushing from the treetops could be heard. To love and to kiss here must be divinely beautiful, I told myself. Simply to tread on the ground became a pleasure. The stillness kindled prayers in the feeling soul. To lie here inconspicuous in the cool forest earth must be sweet. That one might still sense and enjoy death, even in death. To have a grave in the forest would be lovely. I guess I've been thinking a lot about death recently, and particularly my own, and others, but more so, I suppose, how it'll really feel once it's all said and done. Once like life starts slipping away, and I guess my resolve came from, rather than resisting the natural order of things, instead to embrace that sort of great, vast unknown, which is easier said than done sometimes, particularly when one's own existence is slipping away in real time, or even someone close to you. I think if the moment you witness someone very, very close to you pass when you didn't think that they ever could or ever would, at least within as soon as it happened, it brings one to confront that which who is close to them is also confronting in a different way, not so directly, but it's less difficult to bring that perspective unto the self, or at least sympathize. And so I guess part of that embrace for me has been this romantic idea of whenever I get sick to a point which I would ultimately pass, to sort of just wander into a clearing, into the forest, and just like lie there and just like let I suppose earth take me, the earth, right? Or yeah. But yeah, I guess that line really stuck out to me. To have a grave in the forest would be lovely, because it was something I'd been thinking about. That's not to say to rush it or anything, but and then he even goes into philosophy on music. He comes across a songstress, or just a woman or a girl who's singing a song, and he says to her a number of things. He gets into a number of conversations with people, and they're all very, very engaging, and they turn, and it's just funny. He even very early on in the book, he goes into a bookstore, and he asks the bookkeeper, "What's the most popular book?" Then the bookkeeper brings him the book, and he's like, "This is the best book?" And he's like, "Yeah, this is the book that you should read." And the bookkeeper's very excited to pass on this knowledge. And then the narrator just walks out cold and just leaves him there because he doesn't want a book. He was basically just fucking with him, or messing with him, because he doesn't want to read a book that everybody else has read. And I just thought that was pretty funny. And there's multiple situations like that. I really love the story. So on song, he comes across a songstress, and he says, "In a beautiful song, there is always a concentration and compression of experience, perception, and explosive aggregate of condensed feeling, life, and animation of the soul." And damn, that isn't a good way to describe a good song. I mean, so, okay. And then, let's see. Later on. Okay, this whole passage is just really great, but I'm going to skip around. The wonderful image of the present swiftly became a feeling which overpowered all others. All notion of future paled, and the past dissolved. The earth became a dream. I myself had become an inward being, and I walked as in an inward world. What we understand and love understands and loves us also. The inward self is the only self which really exists. Where would we humans be if there was no good earth faithful to us? And if that isn't a freaking wonderful meditation on just presence, I mean, it's sort of becoming, and conscious becoming, in real time, which is pretty awesome. Okay, and then also he comes across a castle, or sort of a historic area. And it's a wonderful day, but he says, "A thunderstorm, as I walked on, would no doubt be magnificent here. I hope I shall have the opportunity to experience one." And I suppose that's not a thought that I have very regularly, to appreciate a thunderstorm or a set of ruins in the darkness, or I was going to say in the light, but given it's not so light during a storm. But yeah, I don't know. I do know. I like that. I like the idea. Okay. And then later on, okay, this is sort of the last quote I have written down, but I mean, I've annotated the whole book, but who cares? On the whole, I consider a constant need for delight and diversion in completely new things to be a sign of pettiness, lack of inner life, of estrangement from nature, and of a mediocre, defective gift of understanding. It is the little children for whom one must always be producing something new and different in order to stop their being dissatisfied. I mean, I feel like it's just ever present. I mean, present, what am I saying? You know how many times I've refreshed my feed today? My YouTube feed? I don't have other social media, so I just do the YouTube feed, or like my email. Why do I do that? It's just like, yeah, I mean, I suppose it's always been a thing. And that's not to say that's all I do in my entirety, but, and I know plenty of other people do it as well. I mean, I know, obviously I'm not alone in that, but sometimes I wish I could get out of that easier, and shake off that groove, or get out of that groove. And then finally, I'm going to read this whole passage because it's just so beautiful. As I observed earth and air and sky, a melancholy, overwhelming thought seized hold of me that forced me to say to myself that I was a poor prisoner between heaven and earth, that we were all miserably locked up in such a way that for all of us there was nowhere a path into the other world save the one path that led down into the pit, into the earth, into the grave. So then this rich life, all beautiful, bright colors, this joy in life, and all human meaning, friendship, family, and beloved, the tender air full of gay, delightful thoughts, houses of fathers, houses of mothers, and dear gentle roads, moon and high sun, and the eyes and hearts of men must one day fade away and die. The Walk. Freaking check it out if you want. I got the New Directions, I think, paperback. And translator is Susan Bernofsky and Christopher Middleton. Yeah, those two. And apparently the guy is a Swiss author. I think this came out in, let's see, it's like late 1800s. I don't know. So he was born in 1878, so probably came out early 20th century. But he actually died on Christmas Day while out for a walk. So he died doing what he loved. Yeah, he really goes into like the importance, or not I say the importance, but the fruits that one receives from a walk, and that's pretty awesome. Okay, now onto the more brainy stuff. Plato's The Symposium. I read the speech of Aristophanes, because that's just what I'm on right now. And man, this is very, very interesting. Actually, I'm gonna grab another book that this totally reminded me. There's a passage in that I want to pick out. And the second book is, well, I guess it'll come to light in a moment. All right. So basically, this is a dialogue between multiple people about love. All right. So it starts off with Aristophanes completely sort of redefining the human origin story, which is pretty rad. So he says, there were 3 genders initially, not just the present 2, male and female. There was also a 3rd one, a combination of these 2. Now its name survives, although the gender has vanished. Then androgynous was a distinct gender as well as a name, combining male and female. Now nothing is left but the name, which is used as an insult. The reason why there were these 3 genders and why they were as described is the parent of the male gender was originally the sun, that of the female gender the earth, that of the combined gender the moon, because the moon is a combination of sun and earth. And so I suppose these beings were, he described them as, the shape of each human being was a rounded hole with back and sides forming a circle. Each one had 4 hands and the same number of legs and 2 identical faces on a circular neck. They had 1 head for both the faces, which were turned in opposite directions, 4 ears, 2 sets of genitals, and everything else was as you would imagine from what I've said so far. Okay. So these were like fucking just a bunch of, yeah, but they could function, I suppose, fine. So they would, I suppose they had 1 mind, because they could, it's said that they could walk or run wherever they wanted, and they would do it. So, I mean, to have that kind of coordination, I would think, yeah, he had 1 head for both faces. Yeah, okay, so 1 mind. And I guess they had ambitions. Oh yeah, they had ambitions to make an attack on the gods. And so prior, Zeus had wiped out the giants with a thunderbolt, which in Buddhist iconography is like a symbol for transcendental knowledge. That's not important to this. It was just a fun fact. But if they wiped them all out, the gods would no longer have any of the praise and sacrifices and whatnot, the gifts and honors, that would all disappear. Which actually, okay, I'm not going to talk like that, but I wrote a paper in high school about the death of a god, and man, was I freaking foreshadowing about how a god's life is based off of whether or not human beings give it recognition or not. And so, yeah. Or I suppose also the way human beings would perceive a deity. So if it starts to be perceived as fiction, fable, it will become, I guess, how we see, or how most people see polytheistic beings, deities now, as sort of figures from a long time past, but ultimately irrelevant. Irrelevant to the current Western society, or I don't know, continental thought. I mean, not so much anymore. I mean, there's different schools that are super down to embrace that stuff, especially like depth psychoanalysis, and it's not just the Christian canon anymore, I don't think. But primarily it kind of is, or at least some form of that. Or some sort of monotheistic religion. Anyways, okay. Oh yeah, okay. So if we think, so but what they did say is that Zeus did say is that if we think they're acting outrageously and they won't settle down, I'll cut them in half again so they move around hopping on one leg. And now Joseph Campbell talks about a figure in the crossing of the first threshold of like the hero's journey, I guess. There is a figure in the sand that one comes across. A dangerous, okay, quote, a dangerous one-legged, one-armed, one-sided figure, the half-man, invisible if viewed from the offside, is encountered in many parts of the earth. In Central Africa, it is declared that such a half-man says to the person who has encountered him, "Since you have met with me, let us fight together. If thrown, he will plead, 'Do not kill me. I will show you lots of medicines.' And then the lucky person becomes a proficient doctor. But if the half-man, called the Chirui, a mysterious thing, wins, his victim dies." And so that just, I did not expect to come across that so soon, because I read that chapter like last week. Right, okay. So Aristophanes then goes on to say that love is the name for the desire and pursuit of wholeness. Before this, as I say, we were unified. So the ultimate goal for these beings, now that they're separated into two, is to reunite and become what they were before, together. So saying our human race can only achieve happiness if love reaches its conclusion and each of us finds his loved one and restores his original nature. Now I do sort of paraphrase here, or at least skip around. So I like basically underline certain sentences and like piece them together so that the main idea still stays. That is to find a loved one who naturally fits your own character, leading us towards what is naturally close to us. If we show reverence towards the gods, he, love, will restore us to our original nature, healing us, and so giving us perfect happiness. What I really, really found interesting is actually the explanation that he gives for the androgynous figure. So he says, those men who are cut from the combined gender, the androgynous, as it was called then, are attracted to women, and many adulterers are from this group. Similarly, the women who are attracted to men and become adulteresses come from this group. Adultery is, I guess, if you don't know, it's sort of mingling, maybe sexual or emotional. I guess it's included emotional now these days with outside of marriage. Those women who are cut from the female gender are not at all interested in men, but are drawn much more towards women. Female homosexuals come from this group. And then he goes on to say that male homosexuals are, who are part of this group, that these are the best of their generation, both as boys and young men, because they are naturally the bravest. Some say that they are shameless, but that isn't true. It's not out of shamelessness that they do this, but because they are bold, brave, and masculine, and welcome the same qualities in others. Here's clear evidence of this. Men like this are the only ones who, when grown up, end up as politicians. Then going on to say there is a, what is it called, podiatry? It's basically like older guys and like younger boys. It was not like an uncommon thing to see in Greece. But going on to talk about love, this sort of leads into this. So there he brings that up, and then the two don't want to spend any time apart from each other. These are people who live out their whole lifetimes together, but still can say what it is they want from each other. I guess I find it difficult to wonder how long a couple actually lasts, but maybe it's just because the divorce rate's so high nowadays. But, so, but okay, and then yeah, that just about does it for the symposium. or at least the speech of Aristophanes. Okay, last but not least, AI ethics. This gets pretty immediate. Okay. 171. Excuse me. Okay. The ideal of democracy is also endangered by the fact that power is concentrated in the hands of a relatively small number of large corporations. Okay, so this completely time skips to now. So, if a handful of companies exercise power not only over individuals, by profiling us, they centralize power, but also over infrastructures for democracy, then in spite of their best intentions to contribute to ethical AI, such companies also put up barriers to it. Before I go on, this is Mark Quackelberg's AI ethics. Yeah, man, pretty dicey. There's sort of a this chapter was called on challenges for policymakers, so policymaking around AI. I guess there's sort of a bottom up and top down sort of way of going about things, but typically it's more so top down, which can be a little more abstract. Bottom up is sort of looking at, it's sort of starting from the root, obviously, but in doing so, it helps, it does cut back on time, or I say to cut back on time. It makes the process a little bit slower, but it does make it more airtight, and less, because when it sort of happens with top down, it can be very vague, from what I understand. And then there's he says the chilling effect of data repurposing. So basically, we're also doing like basic free data mining, I believe. Basically free work for these companies just by sort of being on, allowing them to use our data. So it's free digital labor, I think it's what it's called. Yeah. That it could be said that users of social media do free digital labor by producing data for companies. So, but nobody really cares, unfortunately. But so I guess there's a concern towards a pessimistic sort of way of seeing how it could even occur that sort of these individuals who are in power of AI would even begin to think about it as as a concerning issue. For example, comparing it to the global climate change stuff. So, if we compare the situation with environmental policy, we also may also be pessimistic about the possibility that countries will take effective and collaborative action concerning AI ethics. Concerning, for example, the political processes, I don't know how to say that, around climate change in the US, where sometimes even the very problem of global warming and climate change is denied, and where powerful political forces work against taking action, or the rather limited success of international climate conferences to agree on a common and effective climate policy. So basically, nobody's like, nobody's looking at the problem. Oh no. Or recognizing it as a problem. I mean, you would even have like people, politicians going against it openly, invalidating its existence, which happens with global warming. So, I mean, some people don't think it's real. That's fine. Whatever. Okay, so our everyday ethics may not be a matter of fully articulate reasoning at all. Sometimes we respond to ethical problems without being able to fully justify our response. True. Wittgenstein, as a quote from him, our ethics is not only embodied but also embedded in a form of life. The problem is not only about power, it is about the good for individuals and the good for society. Our current ideas about the good life and the good society, if we can even articulate them at all, may well need a lot more critical discussion. I don't know if we can all get on the same page, man. But it would be cool if we could. This stuff gets kind of scary because going on to say there's also this idea of like an AI winter, which is the slowing down of AI development and investment. And he goes on to say this has nothing to do with the singularity, Terminators, or other apocalyptic scenarios about the distant future, but with the slow but certain increase in the accumulation of technological risk and the resulting growth of human, social, economic, and environmental vulnerabilities. I mean, just even going on I don't know, I saw this like headline, maybe it's bullshit, but I don't know, I don't think it's bullshit. I don't know, but it was like kids in high school like couldn't even like, or just couldn't like pass, like a large number of students could not go into the next grade because it was just they just didn't know how to do it, and I guess they were just using like AI. I don't know if that was the inference there, or the insinuation I was supposed to grasp onto, but okay, we need to ensure that on one hand, people with the humanities background become aware of the importance of thinking about new technologies such as AI and can acquire some knowledge of these technologies and what they do. On the other hand, scientists and engineers need to be made more sensitive to the ethical and societal aspects of technology and development use. So in sort of bridging that gap, we'll become more well-rounded in our collaboration or even our say in this policy making when it does occur. Hopefully that, I mean, ideally we would have a say somewhat, that we would be able to more accurately judge and even make policies for just like, I mean, you keep seeing stories about people piecing out. That's not a fun way to say it. I mean, I'm not laughing at this. Basically taking their own, I don't know, what can I say this on YouTube? Taking themselves out of the game. Because I guess AI, and not just because of it, but it's because it's not because of it either, but it's because they used it in the way that one would use Google to look up the most efficient way to sort of do something, but also even mirroring a sort of enabling for that kind of behavior. And maybe it's worth monitoring, or not monitoring, but regulating or having some sort of class in school maybe on how to like properly use this stuff without, okay. But then finishing off, if there lives such a thing as evil at all, it lives in the mindlessness of banal everyday work and decisions. So it's when, that was the last quote, but yeah, AI is, I mean, it sort of comes and goes in terms of how much attention it gets. I mean, you walk outside and things are relatively normal, if you're lucky enough to be in that kind of situation. But I don't know, man. Yeah, we should at least have the space to ask the questions and to decide Because sometimes it may be that technology is still unreliable or has serious ethical drawbacks, and that at least some applications should not be used yet. But they're kind of just popping out. I mean, you see fucking the wave, what's it called? The self-driving cars. Is it called Waves? No, is that the freaking... That's the app, dude. Self-driving. What are they called? Waymos. Waves. That's the freaking... That's a map thing. But yeah... And then there's a lot of talk about a sort of disparity between, I say a lot of talk, I've watched a few videos, but whatever, about there being a large number of people who grew up not knowing how to do the things that I suppose older generations might know how to do, like basic math or reading or critical thinking, or writing, just because it hasn't been, yeah. And then it can cause a disparity between those who know and those who don't. And that can be, what does that look like? But I don't know, knowledge is sort of neutralized now. I mean, if you know what you're looking for, it's relatively accessible, and AI can help with that. In terms of information, I guess I like to think of it as like more personable. But even Google now has a search engine, AI engine, or whatever. So I don't know, man. So, how am I doing today? I'm doing okay. I had a pretty relaxing weekend. Yeah, okay. I have really nothing else to say. I spoke for like 42 minutes, man. Okay, I'm sorry this is so long. If you made it to the end, thanks. If not, no worries. This is Logos Day, so a long time. Alright, I'll catch you later. Peace.